And so I think at this point we are ready to get started. And I will first call upon Shelley to see if she would like to give her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It's good to be here, or Sunny. It's good to be here, and I'm with you in the celebration of the victory last night with the IU Hoosiers. That was exciting. Well, the 2026 session is continuing. We began the first 2 weeks of December, which means we'll end 2 weeks early, and they're saying February 27th. We, as a Democratic caucus, our focus is on 4 pillars of affordability, primarily childcare, housing, healthcare, and utility rates. And we were very targeted in the bills that we filed, and some are moving through the legislature, kind of in a surprising way. We had 2 of our bills heard the first official week, so it would have been in December. One was a medical debt bill that our Senator Cordora filed. It has since been taken over by the first author now is Senator Charbonneau, but that's sometimes how it goes. So we had one of our priority bills heard the first week of session back in December. We have another of our bills for affordability to help our retirees, and that is the 13th check. That was heard the first week, and it's moving through. It's Senate Bill 63, authored by Senator Niezgodski. I had a bill on the value of our public lands. I don't know if you recall, but last year I successfully amended the DNR agency bill to include an interim study in which we conducted that interim study over last fall, and it came up with unanimously several very good recommendations. I sat down with DNR and identified 3 that were fiscally neutral so we could get those through this session. And that bill got a hearing on Monday and will be on third reading on this Monday. That bill does kind of 3 things. It will ask DNR to get some proposals from our state institutions on looking at the impact of natural lands on public health and mental health. Number 2, it's going to have the DNR look at possible efficient and consistent visitor fee collection systems at our state fish and wildlife areas. And then finally, the role that our natural lands play in mitigating and recovering from natural disaster. So that's exciting, and we'll be on third readings on Monday. And of course, I cannot leave my time without telling you some things to really look out for. These are, I see that is bill number 67. So the bill that I have authored and it's moving, that's bill number 67. I know, 67, I don't know. I was just a luck of the draw there. So some things to look out for. The priority bill for the Senate Republicans is SB 1, and it will put on further restrictions on Medicaid access and SNAP benefits. It's more fraud rhetoric, but really it's equating fraud rhetoric with trying to find ways of cutting people who are eligible off of Medicaid and SNAP funding. I think we should also look at, there are some changes to bills. Senate Bill 11 introduces adding a firing squad to our execution methods in the state of Indiana. Senate Bill 73 criminalizes mask wearing in public spaces, public assemblies. That is a Gary Byrne bill. This one is very alarming. This is Senate Bill 145, authored by Mike Young. This creates a downtown Indy district with state policing and state special prosecution leverage in this downtown district. That's Senate Bill 145. There is Senate Bill 236, which is a Senator Johnson bill, which will put greater restrictions on abortion-inducing drugs, as well as greater reporting expansions on reproductive health. Senate Bill 138 is the school chaplaincy bill is back. That's Bill 138. That bill is back. And I thought this was really fascinating and alarming, but probably very important to the League of Women Voters, voter members. And that's Senate Bill 12, prohibiting ranked choice voting. That's the first time I've seen that bill in my time. I mean, shoot, I feel like I'm young compared to some of my colleagues in the Senate in terms of my time in the Senate. But it is a prohibition on ranked choice voting, which I really found interesting in a time and from a party that is really about, waving the flag of government overreach, prohibiting ranked choice voting. Seems like a lot of overreach. The other thing that I thought is that we heard was the extension of our syringe exchange programs. That bill was heard and successfully got out of health and will be on second reading on Monday, but was not unanimous. There is still some pushback, not based on data whatsoever. It's totally based on anecdotal evidence of people saying there seems to be a lot of unaccounted for needles out there. So that I think is something we should all be concerned about. Another government overreach bill, because this bill only extends the sunset of local governments who have voted to start and have a syringe exchange program in their counties. This would remove that and have a ban on syringe exchange programs for the entire state. So currently, 4 of our counties have syringe exchange programs that have changed the minds of those who were against them originally, strictly because of the data that it shows in bringing down rates of Hep C, HIV, and being able to track what drugs are being introduced to the market by testing the needles that are exchanged. So that's another bill, and I should have that. Let me see if I can get that number for you as I wrap up my comments here. But another bill to look out for is that I would love your thoughts on. That is a bell-to-bell cell phone bans in schools. That will be on the floor on second readings. It made it through committee. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, as well as a social media ban for minors. That is another bill, and that is, I think, Senate Bill 129. But I'm going to have to, I think there are a couple. I might be telling you wrong on that one. But I just wanted to say thank you. Those are a few bills to keep an eye out for, as well as our priorities as Senate Dems. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Shelley, for those opening remarks and alerting us to those bills. Matt, would you like to now give your opening remarks?
Sure. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. And I thought I would start by kind of giving you the schedule for the session, because it is a very compressed session at this point. So all bills, this is the House schedule. Usually that tracks fairly closely with the Senate. They kind of confer with each other on it. But in the House, our bills have to be out of committee by January 26th. So any bill introduced that's not moved out of committee by January 26th is dead. So today's the 10th. That means we got a little over 2 weeks for bills to move out of committee. Then on the 28th is the deadline for bills to be called down for amendment on the floor. That's the second reading stage. And then final passage, known as third reading in the House, that all has to be done by January 29th. So before we get to the end of the month, we will know which bills have survived and which have died in the House. And then in the second half, which the other thing too is normally there's like a little halftime break, or there's a couple days, maybe as much as a week, where the legislature is in recess. They're just plowing ahead. And so there won't be any break. We'll just jump right into the other house's bills. And so Senate bills in the House will have to be out of committee by February 19th. amended on the floor by February 23rd. And then all Senate bills sent over to the House have to be passed third reading, basically voted out of the House by February 24th. And then this will be interesting to see how this works. So then there's normally a period for conference committees, because if the second House amends the first House's bill, you have to have a conference committee to meet to figure out how to make that bill reconcile. They have to come up with a compromise to have the bill read exactly the same way. And then each House has to approve that conference committee report. And normally you have, a couple of weeks to work on that kind of stuff. And it's the conference committee period is going to be from Wednesday, the 25th until Friday, the 27th in the House. At least that's what they're saying. So you've got like a 3-day period. If you have conflicts within bills from the House and the Senate that need to be resolved. So I suspect what that means is the Senate Republicans will likely be talking to the House Republicans and trying to either avoid amendments in the second House or agree upon what those amendments are going to be. And then you can do what's called a concurrence vote, where the first House basically votes to accept the changes that were made by the second House, and then it would go off to the governor. So we'll see whether that's a super hectic, last 3 days of the session, or whether they kind of have everything greased ahead of time on that. So that's the basic schedule. Now, the one thing I want to do before I talk about some of the priorities and what's been introduced in the House is I really want to raise the alarm bell about a very troubling bill, which is House Bill 1343. It's already been voted out of committee. I don't believe the committee report's been adopted on the floor yet, but it's kind of a mishmash of things. It has a lot of things about veterans and their benefits, but within that bill is a provision which authorizes the Adjutant General of the Indiana National Guard to establish a military police force, which will be able to enforce laws against civilians. Basically, they'd just be like any other police officer. And then the governor is given the ability to deploy that military police force throughout the state or in any part of the state he feels like. So to me, this is a son of Donald Trump. I always have the feeling that Governor Braun really would like to be just like Donald Trump. And I think this is his attempt. It's like, gee, Donald Trump gets to send National Guard into Democratic areas, and he gets to send ICE into Democratic areas. I really wish I had my own police force that I could send into Democratic areas. And I think Indianapolis would probably be the area they would do. So if we want to avoid kind of ICE-like mayhem at the hands of Governor Braun, we got to work really hard to defeat this bill. And so I suspect it's going to be on the floor of the House probably next week. So we'll see how that works out. That's assuming the committee report gets adopted on schedule. But I'm actually very surprised that we haven't had more discussion about this in the media and a little bit more attention to it. So that's something to keep an eye on. Okay, so I guess the good news is the Republicans in the House have awakened, and they have decided that affordability actually is a thing. Apparently, it's not a media hoax, as our president suggested. And so they're focusing in on a couple of areas where they say they're going to do something about affordability. They've got a bill on housing, and essentially their answer is to override local zoning authority and authorize a lot of building within residential areas that many communities have not allowed. The kinds of things that have had a great deal of debate and pretty strenuous discussion within the Bloomington City Council. But the whole premise of that bill is that if you get government out of the way, if you reduce the regulations on building, you will save a lot of money in building out the infrastructure and getting the approvals for your development. The thing is, there's nothing in the bill that I'm aware of that would require those cost savings to actually be passed on to the buyers of the homes. So it could end up just being profit in the pockets of the developers. So we'll have to see how that bill might evolve as it passes through. The other area they've decided to address in the name of affordability is electric utility rates, which I'm like, it's like about time. I've been talking about this for many years now, because the truth is a lot of the policies put in place by the Republican majority have caused our rates to go up. They've basically been giving everything away to the utilities, and now they figured out that politically in an election year, that's not the best position to be in. And so the bill is a mix of some complicated things that would change the rate making system, which theoretically would result in increases not being as great as they have been in the past. I'm a little skeptical about it. The devil's in the details, so we're working through that. The other thing that's interesting is for the chair of the House Utilities Committee, he really thinks it's not so much a problem that utility rates are high. He thinks that the problem is people don't understand that when it gets hot in the summer and you use your air conditioning a lot, you use more electricity, therefore you will have a much higher bill. So his answer to that is one provision of the bill would default everybody into what's called balanced billing. So your bill would be the same every month, and then periodically, maybe every 6 months, there would be this true up period where they would figure out whether you deserve money back because you used less, or whether you need to pay more now because you've consumed more than anticipated. There would be the opportunity to opt out of that, but everyone would default in. I'm not certain that's really the best policy, but I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony on it. So there'll be a lot of debate on that, and I have some of my own ideas. I think the number one thing that we could do is basically remove the sales tax, the 7% sales tax on utilities, because we don't charge sales tax on food and clothing, things we consider necessities. And if utilities not a necessity, I don't know what is. So we'll see if we can get any traction on that. The other two big priority bills, and by the way, they only have 4. Normally, and over these years, the Republicans always have 10 bills they designate as like their official agenda bills. I think the Republicans are running out of steam. I think they've been in control of the place for so long. They've completed their bucket list, and they have to think hard about what they might do there. And so they only have 2 other things that they say they're going to do as their big priorities. One is they got a whole big list of boards and commissions they want to eliminate, which they claim will make things more efficient. I think it's not really the case. Most of those boards don't take up much money at all, if any. And then finally, for about the 18th time, it seems like they're going to have a bill to deregulate the K through 12 school system. So we go through this cycle where they add a lot of new regulations and requirements to how the schools will operate. And then they say, oh, there are too many burdens on the schools. Let's get rid of all these regulations. And then we have an interesting discussion about that, because oftentimes the things they're trying to deregulate are health and safety requirements for the school, or fundamental things you want to make sure kids learn. So it'll be interesting to see what that list of deregulated school things actually are. All right, and I'll just finish up because I know we're got to get to questions. Just as far as the Democrats are concerned, we're pleased that they're at least going to try to do something on housing and electric rates, and we'll have some of our ideas we're putting forth there. But they're not doing anything on healthcare. They're pretty much, I think, trying to avoid that issue for this session. And so one of the things we'd like to at least attempt to get done from the House Democrats' perspective is to make sure that people who incur medical debt do not have that destroy their credit rating. So we would have limitations on those types of debts ending up on your credit report. And then finally, childcare. They need to do something about childcare. They want to avoid it, essentially. We think that parents should get some tax credits to help them afford that, and that we should be fully funding the CCDF vouchers. I mean, they're really kind of destroying the childcare system, because we're having a lot of providers have to shut down because they're just not getting the money any longer to pay their employees. And so we're going to be, if not already, at a crisis point on that. And so we think that needs to be addressed. And then finally, Senate Bill 1, the property tax bill, there's some hope they'll fix that big giant mess that got created. I suspect they're not going to do much more than kind of nibble around the edges, but that's a whole nother train wreck that needs to get addressed.
Matt, thank you so much for giving us those opening remarks, and a couple of the items kind of send chills through our bones, but we're glad that you're on top of all of these things. We do have one person in the queue to ask a question. So I hope that while she's asking her question, others of you will excuse me, write to one question moderator and indicate that you have a question as well. The first one in the queue is Sharon Roulette. I hope I pronounced that right. If you would unmute Sharon and ask your question, directing it first to Matt. Sharon, do you want to?
Yeah, okay, I'm here. I'm just trying to figure this out here.
Okay.
Should I put the video on?
It's up to you.
It says unable to start video. So, okay. I don't need the video. Speaking of those IU Hoosiers, everybody in the universe is cheering for IU right now. And I am too, but I am more concerned with Senate Bill 110. And as far as I can tell, I'm the only person who cares about Senate Bill 110. I've even been asked to not talk about it. They're trying to, it's to fix what happened in the SB 1 last year and to restore the elections of the IU Board of Trustees. The Alumni Association got 2 Republican senators to sponsor this bill, and I've heard absolutely nothing about it. So should I just forget about it, or is there any chance that there will be some action on Senate Bill 110 restoring elections at IU?
Well, you should definitely not forget it. I doubt the Alumni Association is doing anything because Pam Whitten is the one who got those people removed. And so I doubt she's going to let her Alumni Association do anything. There is some alumni who are involved in that association who have been working on their own to form a coalition to see if they can get this done. And so Senator Glick has introduced Senate Bill 110. I had a bill drafted for the House. My advice to the people who are, we're trying to get this done is, let's, if possible, let the Republicans lead the charge on getting those elections reinstated, and let's kind of get behind that and hope that they can move. Because I believe there are probably a lot of alums across the state who are Republicans who are not very happy about having that right to choose 3 trustees taken away from them with no debate, no discussion, no chance for amendment at all. And so it's unclear to me what the chances are for it to get out of the Senate, but I think that's our best hope, is to have a Republican carrying the bill. And so I think that it's definitely worth getting engaged, and I think there's some people working on that.
Thank you, Matt. Shelley, do you want to address that question?
Sharon, thank you for your question. You're not alone. Lots of people care about it. I've heard about them. I can't join the bill right now because that would definitely be a flag of ways to kill a bill at this point. So it's great that she has 2 Republicans on that bill. And please don't give up. I mean, it needs to be calls made to every single senator, in particular, the committee in which it was assigned. I need to look where it was actually assigned to get that chair to hear the bill. So don't give up, but you do need to probably organize quickly and mobilize a pretty serious campaign to get it a hearing in the committee that it was assigned. And I'll look online to see where it was assigned, and I will let you know in the next Q&A.
I just looked it up. It's in education and career development.
Oh, well, okay, so that's Senator Rotz, and just do a heavy duty full court press on getting him to hear the bill.
Well, I see the stadium full of fans, and I just want to have a little halftime announcement or something, like, because it's something that's important, and there was initial outrage, but the outrage has all been diminished instead of expanded. due to the football, the fun and stuff. So anyways, but thank you. I appreciate any help that you can give to that
Thank you.
poor little thing.
Thank you, Sharon, for mentioning that. And as one individual put in the chat, if 800,000 IU fans can show up for the game, let's hope a few of them can show up and get our legislature to let our alumni voices count.
Woohoo! Go IU!
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next person in the queue is Tammy Smith. And I'm reminding everybody, please be getting in the queue to ask your questions. Tammy, I'll ask you to unmute and direct your question first to Shelley.
Hi, Shelley. Actually, this is a House bill that I have a specific question about. So do with that what you will. It is HJR2, and it's about county officers. And I know that, I can't remember the name of the committee that it was in. I know Matt is in that committee. Are those committees going to meet again? Does this thing have any possibility of movement? I think it's a pretty bad idea.
Okay. Are you familiar with that bill, Shelley, or should we defer over to Matt to see if he's familiar with it?
Well, I'm wondering, can you check on the number again for me?
It was HJR2, but I will Google that again to make sure, or I'm sorry, look on IGA's site again and double check it. It had to do with county officers and making them not elected. There was a whole list of them. They were like wanting to take away from being elected.
Okay, hold on. Let me just really quickly.
Yeah, I found it up. It's Elizabeth Roway introduced that, and yeah, it would make basically most of the elected county offices appointed. The argument is they're ministerial. The auditor, the treasurer, the recorder, that they don't need to be elected because they're just doing ministerial things, not policy things. And I don't know if it's going to get any traction at all. I haven't heard about it yet. Yeah, I think that was sent to the elections committee, which I'm on. It has not been listed for the elections committee's first hearing. And the other thing to keep in mind is it's a joint resolution because you have to amend the Constitution because those offices, at least some of them, are listed in the Constitution as required to be elected. And so the process to amend the Constitution that would then allow the legislature, if it wanted to make them appointed, is you have to have two separately elected general assemblies approve the resolution. So it'd have to go through the House and Senate this year. Then we'd have the election in November. Then in 27, it would have to go through the House and the Senate a second time and be approved. And then the legislature would have to adopt legislation putting the question on the ballot, should HJR2, be adopted. And so they would have to go to the voters probably in 2028, probably be the general election in 28, assuming that this all went like clockwork. So it's a very long process. And it's not clear to me whether that is a thing that's going to happen or not. I mean, it's not on the Republicans' agenda list or anything. So right now, not much chatter about that bill.
But can I say something in addition? Tammy, I know you didn't ask this question, but it is somehow connected. And that is Senate Joint Resolution 1 in the Senate. This is the second time that it will be going through, and it is a constitutional amendment regarding concerning bail. And this will be the second time. And if it passes and it is a priority of the Senate Republicans to get this passed. And that means if it would be successful this year getting out, then it would, we would, I think, it would change the Constitution. So while HJR2 is starting the process, SJR1 is in the last stages of the process. So I would encourage folks to look on IGA's website at SJR1 and know that this would, that it provides that an offense other than murder or treason is not bailable if proof is evident or the presumption is strong that the person did commit murder, and two, the state proves by clear and convincing evidence that there is a severe safety concern to the community. So a change in concerning bail is up for amending the Constitution in SJR 1.
Yeah, if I could, let me just jump in there a little bit because I serve on the Bail Reform Commission, which has kind of had this issue. So what that constitutional amendment is trying to do is right now our Constitution says, other than being charged with treason or murder, you have a constitutional right to bail. And so the only question is, how high will the bail be set? And normally the judge thinks about that based on whether they think you might be a threat to the community, but mostly whether you'll actually show up for your court date. So if SJR2 passes, which everyone is operating under the assumption that it will, and then be approved by the voters, judges would then have the right to essentially determine that someone's a danger to the community or a flight risk and basically have them held without any bail at all. They could just basically, they call it preventative detention. And if that system goes into place, then you have to have all kinds of due process requirements because the judge is going to have to decide whether you should be detained without bail. And you got to have processes to make sure people have their due process in that system. So that's something to come up. I think there may be legislation. I haven't heard any discussion about it yet, but there was a recommendation that there at least be legislation to get that due process in place, anticipating the constitutional amendment being adopted, but we'll have to see how that comes out. But I think that if you were a betting person, you would think that's probably going to pass this session and be on the ballot for the voters coming up at the end of the year.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the explanation of how a joint resolution works.
And thank you for those questions, Tammy. The next individual in the queue is Kathy Roundtree. Kathy, would you direct your unmute and direct your question to Matt Pierce first?
Good morning. Thank you, folks, for being here. I heard yesterday that there was a bill before the legislature to change the relationship of schools to ICE, that schools were going to be required to disclose information to ICE. Do you all know anything about that, what the current status is and what this would involve? Thank you.
Okay. Matt, do you have any response to this? Do you know anything about this bill?
Yeah, the Republicans in the legislature are obsessed with having every element of state government cooperate with ICE fully. And so there's usually a bunch of bills or one bill with a bunch of stuff in it. So I would not be surprised if some kind of anti-immigration bill moves and requires people to cooperate with ICE. And it's probably an omnibus bill, but I don't know if it's in the House or the Senate. And I haven't seen anything scheduled on that yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the session, a bill is moving that requires cooperation amongst, law enforcement and all kinds of different levels of government. So we're just going to have to keep an eye out for that.
Shelley, would you like to comment on that issue?
Nothing that really adds anything to the conversation. I'm not aware of what bill that is in the Senate, but I'm frantically seeing if I can identify it, if it does, what the situation is. I mean, there is a Senate bill moving right now on immigration issues. It's Senate Bill, what is it? Senate Bill 76. It's a Liz Brown bill. There's a lot of political fire around this bill because there was an immigration bill last year that she did not hear in judiciary, and Senator Jim Banks came after her along with the Attorney General and said that they were going to primary her because she was not hearing these bills to keep Hoosiers safe and keep undocumented immigrants out of the state. She pushed back and doubled down. She filed this bill. Although you can check it out, I've heard that the language is not as awful as the bill last year, but it's still something that we should be aware of. It is on second readings on Monday. That's Senate Bill 76. And I saw that Maria Douglas put in there Senate Bill 122 is the requirement, or SB 133, I'm not sure, is the bill that requires school corporations to cooperate with ICE. Thank you, Maria. I don't know if it's 122 or 133, but we're going to check it out.
Okay. Thank you both again for addressing that issue. We now have another individual in the queue. She's the last one. So please be listening to, but thinking of questions to pose while we have Matt and Shelley available to us. I'd now call on Marion Benzoff. If you would unmute and ask your question, directing it first to Shelley.
Well, it's to anybody. I'm just want to make sure that redistricting is dead. Is it dead, or is there a possibility that someone will try to introduce something to resurrect it? And also just a big shout out to all the activism that stopped it during this special session. Thanks.
Thank you, Marion.
It's the redistricting question is dead. And I mean, props to Senator Bray. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think it wasn't just to save Hoosiers money. It was to make sure it couldn't come back up again in this in the session. So the fact that we came back early and started the 2026 session in December means that we can't hear that or have that bill again.
Thank you, Shelley. Matt, do you have any comments on that issue?
Yeah, just both the House and the Senate, they have a rule called decisively defeated bill. And so if you have a majority of the House or the Senate vote the bill down, then that concept of that subject matter of the legislation is no longer eligible for consideration during that particular session. So the fact that the Senate decisively defeated the bill means that the Senate cannot take it up again during this session. Now, we always say you're never safe till the legislature adjourns because rules committees can suspend rules and things could happen. But believe me, I think the last thing those Republicans want to do is go back and relive the redistricting fight again. So I think we're fairly safe that they have all moved on to the next thing.
Thank you very much. I would just for a moment pose a related question, and that is, I know that the League was part of a coalition that lobbied greatly to try and get an independent commission. Do you think there's any possibility of something like that coming back before the legislature?
Well, I've offered nonpartisan amendments and things more times than I can count to try to make that happen. I think my hope is that all this mid-decade redistricting and just the shameless, admission that this is all being done for partisan advantage would get some people fired up that are normally not even aware of how districts get drawn or just think that, well, it's all a bunch of political stuff. And so I think that what needs to happen is this needs to become a movement, because what you're asking the Republican majority to do is to give up the number one thing that preserves their power. As long as they have the majority that allows them to redraw the districts, both legislative districts and congressional districts, they can manipulate them to their greatest advantage. And so I think what needs to happen is we need to have people working on building a very broad coalition, hopefully of both Republicans and Democrats, saying, look, we need to have a fair system, and see if we can get that done. Because I think it's difficult to get, these leaders whose power is predominantly made possible by the gerrymandering of the districts, to get them to just voluntarily give that up. That's a very big act of statesmanship, which we don't see too often these days. So I think it has to be something where it's a movement and it becomes a key thing in an election, and members begin to decide, you know what, I can't be against that, or I'm not going to get reelected. And of course, that's a very tall order. To me, it kind of reminds me of, let's say, the women's suffrage movement or civil rights movement, where it's a very long, sustained, effort. And so that's what's going to have to happen to get that changed.
Thank you, Matt. Shelley, do you have a viewpoint on that particular issue of redistricting commission independent of the legislature?
Yes, we should do it. We absolutely continue pushing for that. That's very important.
Well, and it seems as if now is the time to keep pushing on that issue with the fact that we just had this effort to try to redistrict midterms. Thank you very much for your support on those things. Yes, I do have a few people in the queue. Tammy Smith, I believe you have another question you would like to pose.
Thank you. This is for Shelley. You, in the past, you've had bills regarding I'm going to use the phrase period tax. And you have another one this year, I think?
Yes, I do.
How does that look?
How does that look? A lot of interest in it. And I think it's really interesting in concert with the conversation that everyone is talking about repealing the utility tax, the tax on utility rates, because of the conversation that those are necessities and we don't tax necessities. But yes, in fact, we do, because menstrual products are necessities. And the fiscal on this is so small. This is a 4.5 to $1 million, $5 million fiscal on it. But at a time when families are feeling the squeeze when it comes to buying groceries, I've heard the resistance to this from my Republican colleagues on both sides. They'll say, this is, we're not going to hear this bill because it's not real relief for families. This isn't real relief for women and girls who pay this, for 30 plus years of their lives. Let's find a way to provide real relief. So I hear that. And then I hear, no, we can't do it because it's too costly to the state. And if we repeal the tax on menstrual products, what's next? We just to remind people, we have removed sales tax from lottery tickets, RV sales. We give tax breaks to data centers. We give tax breaks. Casinos receive tax breaks, but when it comes to taxing, the one thing that actually gives a chance for engaging the economy and education, we're going to actually build an economy off of that for the state of Indiana and tax those items. So we're continuing that fight. We have support and interest across the board, but we just cannot. There are just a couple of folks in the Senate that don't appreciate the policy. So we're continuing to work on that. But thank you for your interest, and I hope that you'll continue to advocate and let those in the Senate know that it needs a hearing, particularly Senator Holdman, who's in tax and fiscal.
Yeah, it's a similar situation in the House. I mean, the House Democrats have offered, I think, 5 or 6 times this amendment to eliminate this tax. And every now and again, you pick up a little bit of traction. You can see some support kind of growing on the other side, and then something seems to deflate it. So, I mean, we just keep trying. But, this is kind of symptom of a greater problem that I see, which is really frustrating. And I think that the problem probably is that we as members of the legislature have not explained to people enough of what's actually going on here. If you look over the past decade, the legislature has given away billions and billions of dollars of tax revenue, and it's mostly given it away by lowering the corporate income tax, financial institutions tax, Even the income tax, which was 3.4% and went down, is going to go down to 2.9. And I think they're attempting to see if they can just eventually eliminate it over time, a little bit every year. They point to that as their number one helping the little guy kind of tax break. But because it's a flat tax in Indiana, the truth is that, saving 0.5% on your income tax means one thing to somebody who's making, say, $50,000 a year, and it means something else to someone who's making $1 million a year. So that is skewed toward the upper end if you look at it. And so my kind of criticism and argument that I've been kind of giving a hard time to my colleagues in this at Iowa is they're more than willing to cut these taxes on businesses and people on the upper end. And they don't ever raise the issue of whether it's going to impact negatively on the revenues of the state. I mean, they're chopping away the income tax, and they never say, oh, this is going to cost us X amount of money. But if you talk about, let's have a tax credit for parents who need to do childcare. Let's have some more appropriations so we don't have these wait lists for Medicaid, and we can actually meet the demands there. When you talk about any kind of tax break that's targeted on the little guy or the average, working Hoosier family, it's like, oh no, that wouldn't be fiscally responsible. That will cost us way too much money. And so this debate about taxes on menstrual products is the same exact thing. It's like when you raise that, it's like, oh, that might cost us some money. I don't know if we can do that. But then they'll give away $1 billion, somewhere else, or they'll come up with a way to give hundreds of millions of dollars of vouchers to the richest families in Indiana to subsidize their kids' private school education. It's just completely warped priorities. And until we can do a better job of explaining to the public how warped those priorities are, so they get mad enough to get engaged and actually vote, that we can actually get some change in this whole approach.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
We will now go to Alice Hawkins. Alice, I know you've had your hand up there for a little while. If you would like to ask your question, directing it first to Matt.
Well, actually, this is a comment that Shelley asked for. I retired from teaching in 2010, and cell phones were already a problem. And now I substitute teach, and it just is a tidal wave. Nobody, as I sub in all kinds of classes in high school and middle school, especially high school, it seems unstoppable, and it is so necessary. But one of the problems is that when the kids have their laptops or their iPads, they run out of battery, and so they can't use it. The kids know how to skirt things too when they use iPads. So I would like to see somehow for this to be totally banned, because if one teacher tries, it's impossible. So that's my comment.
Okay. Yes, Matt, and Shelley, perhaps you'd like to comment on that and the larger picture of whether you see either of these bills passing relative to banning the phones in schools and the limitations on social media for minors.
Well, with the bell-to-bell cell phone ban, last session, we did, well, maybe it wasn't last, maybe it was 2 years ago, but we did pass some cell phone requiring the school boards of school corporations to create a cell phone policy. So there is already limited use in cell phone use during instruction time. There's limited use. What this would do is it does require school corporations to figure out how they're going to secure these devices, who's going to be in charge of them, how do they get redistributed. There are lots of questions there, and of course, funding, how they're going to pay for this, that I am continuing to hear concerns about. Although the idea of, yes, we want to keep students engaged in the classroom, but is this going to be, again, what they're thinking is it will be put on, the teachers will have to collect them and then redistribute them in these bags. Fort Wayne Community School Corporation, they do this. It was about $1 million for their school corp to do this. And the concern there is, I know that, like, for example, MCCSC that has they have a limited use cell phone policy that if you look at sort of what uh, they've done some surveys. There are some surveys out there of Indiana parents and administrators and teachers on the current use right now. What you're seeing is that there is concern on how they're going to pay for it. And MCCSC is already taking about a $31 million hit because of the passing of SEA 1 and property taxes last year. So that is of concern, even though the majority of parents see the value, but they do want their kids to have limited use. So that's kind of where it is. The likelihood of it passing, pretty good, actually. I mean, I think it will probably pass, having a ban on cell phone use, bell to bell. The social media, I'm not sure. I think I'd still like to hear from folks. I tend, I liken it to seatbelt use. When I talk to my kids about when I was a kid, there were no seatbelts. You just got in the car and, you piled in. There wasn't even a question. And then when they started introducing seatbelt legislation, there was concern like, what if I can't get my child out fast enough? And we had to work through all of those questions. But now, today, we see the impact and the lives that have been saved. And you wouldn't think about not putting your child in a child safety seat or wearing a seatbelt in your car. So I think it's just an adjustment because we see the impact on mental wellness and our young people having high levels of anxiety, and so much of that is being shown as connected to social media use. So I think, if we can come into this and come up with a policy that is going to protect young people but not infringe on civil liberties, I think it would be good for us to have that conversation.
Matt, would you like to comment, please?
Yeah, I think the legislation does have a pretty good chance of passing. I think that, the previous legislation was focused on how do we keep the devices from interfering with the actual education in the classroom. And now I think it's expanded to how do we keep these devices and the social media on the devices from kind of stunting kids' socialization and kind of their personal growth. And so I believe that a lot of people feel it would be very positive if you had a kid, spending 6 hours or whatever it is in school without the device distracting them, and maybe actually learning how to talk to other people in the lunchroom instead of all staring at their phones. So that's kind of the positive impetus for the legislation. But I think you do have some parents that say, hey, look, I like being able to communicate with my kids throughout the day. And I'm particularly concerned that if there's a mass shooting occurrence, that my kid be able to call for help. And so I think that's probably the biggest kind of pushback. It's like, hey, what if some kind of emergency arises and kids need to call 911 or something and they don't have their device to do it? And so I think that will be the main issue that probably has to get worked through.
Thank you both for weighing in on that question. The next individual in the queue is Maria Douglas. Maria, if you would unmute and direct your question first to Matt Pierce.
Thank you so much. I want to thank both of you for always showing up and for the work that you do. I saw Senator Yoder all over yesterday. Maybe it wasn't yesterday, but just all over. And in terms of also spending time with the NAACP state gathering. So, and I saw Representative Pierce at a local event, an All In for Democracy Coalition, or no, Common Cause situation. So it's always great to see you both showing up. Okay, so I had a question, and I still do, and I want to comment as a parent in terms of the cell phone situation. I have two children. They are almost grown. They went through MCCSC. One is currently there. And until there's gun reform, I want my kid to be able to have their cell phone in school. Cell phones are not going away. They're not lessening in terms of tools. So for me, it's way less about removal and restriction and way more about education and navigating how to use them. Yes, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Thank you. So my question, because I've only worked and paid really, really close attention to the legislative sessions for 3 years, can you help me understand these vehicle bills? Because I've like looked them up. I've like, or I mean, I've looked, Googled it. I've AI'd it, and like those vehicle bills, people can like put language in there or pass things real quick. Like, there's a lot. There's quite a few vehicle bills listed right now. So maybe other people have this question too. But if you could help me understand what a vehicle bill is and what, yes, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. This is a parliamentarian's dream to talk about the vehicle bills. Okay, so each house introduces 25 bills that are essentially, at least in the House, I think it's 25, that are essentially shells. There's nothing in them. And they're assigned to the Rules Committee, and they basically sit there in case some topic comes up that the majority wants to address that they didn't think about before the bill filing deadline. And so if they decide that there's something new, they want a new bill, what they do is the Rules Committee, at least this is how it works in the House. It might be, I think in the Senate, they actually assign them to an individual. One individual kind of has custody of them, whatever. But in the House, the Rules Committee will, which essentially the Speaker really, but the vehicle bill will get given to a member, and they become the author of the bill. And then it's assigned to the committee, and it's still an empty shell. Then you have to, in the committee, you have to amend into it the contents you want to put in the bill. So if you have some brand new subject matter, you have to go into the committee, you have a public, it's a regular public hearing of the bill, and then that's where you debate whether to fill the empty bill with the new content. And you vote on it just like you would vote on an amendment to any other bill. And then once that amendment gets put into the vehicle bill, then it moves along just like any other bill. Now, I raised several years ago in the House, because I serve on the Rules Committee, I raised this issue that, you have a problem if you have a vehicle bill that's empty and it doesn't get filled up until committee, you don't have any window in which to amend the new content that went into the vehicle bill. And so in the House, we actually, basically for me complaining, added in some additional rules that make sure there's a window then that anybody can offer amendments in committee to be able to change the content of the new bill, whatever that might be. So I hope that helps.
That was a matter of parliamentary procedure that I'd never heard of before. Shelley, do you have any question or a response from the Senate perspective?
It's similar. Just give you a perspective from the minority leader. We don't have that. I can't just file whatever bill. If something interesting comes up, I'm like, oh, we didn't think about that. I don't have that ability. I will give an example of how a vehicle bill has been used in the last 2 years. So this year, for example, I think I mentioned that Senate Bill 85, which is the medical debt bill that Senator Cadora filed and was heard. It was heard in December. That was one of his 5 bills that he was allowed to file. Then he learned that in order for it to move forward, it had to be, the first author needed to be a Republican senator. So he gave that bill, but he was already out of bills. So he was allowed to use one of the vehicle bills to file before the deadline, another of his, to make 5 for him. So that's how the vehicle bill was used for the minority caucus. But that's, I hope, a bigger, more full picture of what vehicle bills are, but they do look ominous. I mean, you go on to the IGA website, it's just like a wall of vehicle bills and it says nothing, and you don't even understand why they're all there. But never have I ever seen them all be used or even close to getting them. But I think the rules say how many we each get.
Thank you so much, both of you, for that. So it's as sneaky as I kind of thought it was, perhaps.
Well, it is hanging there in the background. So Maria, thank you for drawing our attention to it. The next individual in the queue is Mary Coy. If you would unmute and ask your question, directing it first to Shelley this time.
Hi, Shelley. This isn't really an IGA question, but it concerns all of us. Would you like to comment on the U.S. Postal Service rule on postmarks related to absentee voting?
Let's see. Am I up now?
Yes, go for it.
I think that decision by the post office does not have much impact on Indiana because our absentee or anybody can vote by mail, which is absentee voting here, since we don't have like pure vote by mail. The rule is that the ballot has to be received by the clerk by noon on election day. And they're not using postmarks as any indicator of whether the ballots were timely received. So I'm not aware of an impact on that here. Now, there are other states that allow ballots to be counted several days after the election if they have a postmark from election day or prior, and that could have a pretty significant impact in those states where they've had ballots come in, dribble in 2 or 3 days after the election that were mailed before the election. And so in those states, I think it's going to have a significant impact, and you could wonder whether or not the post office is doing something to impact politics. But I'm not aware of our laws, since we have such restrictive laws on absentee voting in Indiana that it's not as big of an issue.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, the next person in the queue is Kathy Caldy. If you would unmute and ask your question, Kathy. And I will tell everyone I just have one additional person in the queue right now. So if you're thinking of asking a question, please address one question, moderator. Okay, Kathy Caldy. Okay. Kathy, are you still wanting to ask a question of our legislators? Okay, not hearing Kathy Caldy. The next person in the queue is Katrina Luce. If you would like to unmute and ask your question, Katrina.
Hi. My question, I suppose goes to Shelley. How effective is it to contact a senator or any other legislator if you do not live in their district? Because I have a personal connection, for example, with Senator Holdman from years ago, but I don't live in his district. Would he get the email? Would he pay any attention to the email?
Thank you for that question, Katrina. I would say, because you have a personal connection with him, I would definitely reach out to him and make your case, have that relationship established. He will get it. You do have to put your information when you send an email via the Senate district inbox, but he'll still get it. And if you personalize it, I think it would be valuable. But you're right. I mean, personally, when I get emails, I will ask, I'd like, I need to know, are they in district or not? I still consider it because many times I don't get anything in district and I'm kind of curious where people are. But I don't, I do weigh them differently. I do want to know, what are people in Senate District 40 feeling about whatever policy it is? So that's kind of what I would say, Katrina. And maybe you have other people who are in Senator Holdman's district. You can
So-
encourage them.
So he doesn't have somebody screening his emails for him.
He probably has someone else reading them because they got this new system, and for the inbox, your district inbox, which is new over the last couple of years, and it does. I think it's been harder for us to access those emails directly. You have to go through some hoops to make that happen, but. So someone is gathering that information, but I don't think they're, I mean, I don't know if I like the term, what term did you use?
Screening.
Screening. That I don't know. I guess that would probably be up to the legislator.
Okay.
You know, like, I don't want to hear anything outside of my district. I don't know, but it will land somewhere in their inbox.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Katrina. Yes, Matt, did you have any?
Yeah, it's kind of up to each member how they want to handle it. So, for example, I read all my own email directly. I was a staffer for legislators for 10 years. And so I was used to being the person looking at other people's email and stuff. And I just feel like I should do it myself. So I tend to do more stuff myself than maybe some other members just because I used to be the staffer who did it. But um, but the downside of that is when the mail really starts flooding in and it gets really busy, you can get behind on the email, and that can be a problem too. So that's not a perfect solution either. But I think that most members probably have their legislative assistant going through the mail, looking for stuff that's super priority, like, hey, I can't get my Medicaid benefit. This is a crisis. I really need to get my medicine now, and make sure that gets to the, immediate attention pile. And then, if you have a lot of emails coming in on one subject, they're probably summarizing what came in. And so the member can kind of get a shorthand of what's happening with the email if they choose to have somebody kind of triaging it for them, because it can get a little bit overwhelming at times. And I do think that it's kind of not a yes or no answer. And do they care about stuff outside their district? For the most part, I would say that they're going to be most influenced by hearing from their own district. So, for example, if I were to get 100 emails from Martinsville saying, protect my Second Amendment rights, don't do any gun safety legislation, right? That probably, I'm elected to represent people in District 61. And so I'm going to be asking myself, what do people in District 61 think about that? Now, on the other hand, it does kind of tell you one thing, that you've got a bunch of people around the state who are kind of engaged on an issue and care about it, and you can kind of see what's coming in. And so sometimes that makes an impression. It's like, okay, there are lots of people around the state that are paying attention to this issue. And so that maybe gets it a little more focus than some other issues. But by and large, I think the answer is legislators are most interested in hearing from their own constituents, which is why when we had things like this battle over redistricting, building coalitions, networking, using social media, getting friends of friends, family members who live in other districts. So if you have somebody who lived in Bedford, who lived in Martinsville, who lived out in Greene County, and you can get them engaged to contact their legislator, that's when you then can really make some headway on influencing the legislature. So at the end of the day, on the big issues, I think you have to get involved in statewide organizations or just statewide efforts to get people from all over the state contacting their legislators.
Thank you both very much for that answer.
Hi. Excuse me, this is Kathy Caldy, and I finally figured out how to unmute.
Okay, Kathy, we will now allow you to go ahead and ask your question of the legislators.
Okay, thank you. And it's kind of not a question, but an observation from when we've been talking. I've worked in a school system for over 25 years and been involved longer than that with my own kids. And on the cell phone usage, it's really difficult for kids to have the restraint to leave them alone. I mean, if there was a way to get them to put them in their backpacks, and I work in a high school now, and sub in the high school, and it's, half of them do, and half of them don't understand that a parent can get a hold of the office and they can get a hold of them, and they're doing things like, oh well, I got to know what my lunch is, and or my grandpa, I need to hear from him if he's in the hospital, and we understand that, but they just don't even have a concept, because it's always been accessible to them, that like in the older days, obviously I'm older, that the office can get a hold of you. And so I'm not sure how to, my whole feelings on that, because I understand it all, but I also see in the high school level, they just don't get it. No, I mean, they don't understand that there's any other way that life would work, because it's part of them. And like, was it Maria or Marsha, it said, it's part of their life and it's what they've always known. They don't have a concept that there's any other way. And it does, we can't seem in every class to get some kids to focus on learning instead of their cell phones. And so anyway, I just kind of wanted to make that comment. I understand people worried about things happening within the school or tornadoes and things like that, but it is an issue, and it's one that is very difficult for all the teachers to be on board, or the students to even follow through on it. So I don't quite know where to go on that one, except to wanted to express that it is an issue, especially in high schools, and it's one that is going to be difficult to enforce. And with the money that it costs, I can't see school boards. I can't see schools being able to do that. So thank you for all the comments on those things.
Kathy, thank you for your comments as well. As a person right there in the schools, living this every day, I don't do Shelley or Matt, would either of you want to comment on Kathy's remarks?
I just really appreciated them. I think she very, very appropriately described the complexity of this issue. You can see the benefit. You can also see the challenges. So you did a good job of laying out sort of the pros and cons of both sides of the argument. And it's kind of where I am and finding my way through the legislation. It's interesting what we heard and some of the data that we've been looking at. It is interesting to talk about this in terms of, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I love the fact that I know I can get a hold of them. I also, looking at the data, have seen some of the challenges of, God forbid something happening, and the data showing that it actually isn't helpful when people can have that one-on-one exchange with parents during an emergency. I know that sounds really counter to what you would think, but that is some of the data that we're seeing. So that's there. The other is something really striking. They were talking about how Fort Wayne in particular, when the students were observing that when you walk into the cafeteria during lunch, it was quiet. And that's because everybody was just on their phones. Mm-hmm. And now they're walking into the cafeteria and everyone is talking and having conversation and thinking about the value of learning how to socialize and how to make small talk, or just to build those relationships. So it is a complex issue, and I really appreciate everyone's thoughts on the matter.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is a classic world of a legislator, right? So you have kind of competing policies or competing priorities, and you have to figure out which is most important, or is there a way you can come up with a creative solution that allows the two different things to be reconciled? So, I think there's probably a positive to having kids just kind of talking to each other an old-fashioned way and socializing and things like that. And so that's one positive. But on the other hand, you have parents who want to be able to be in contact with their kids, and they want to be certain they can call for help if they need it when something happens. And so you've got two kind of conflicting things there. And the question is, can you come up with a way to make both of those work together somehow? Or can you get enough information to decide whether one really outweighs the other? So, for example, do we have any peer-reviewed kind of academic studies about the impact? I'm sure we do. We just have to go find them. But the impact of cell phones and social media on kids and the way they interact, and is that really a negative, or is that just kind of a new world that we older people can't understand because we didn't have those devices when we were kids? And then that would help you decide how significant of a problem is it that kids spend all day on their phones, and maybe social media is causing some kind of mental health problems. And if you reach a conclusion about that, then you might say, well, okay, maybe that outweighs the concern about the potential where there's an emergency and somebody needs to use their phone. And so that's the, when legislators are working at their best, they're kind of figuring all that out, and they're getting the data and the information, and they're listening to people, and they're weighing all of that. And if they're lucky, they come up with a creative way to make everything work together.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for the question and the comments, Kathy, and also both of your responses, Matt and Shelley. I think one of the things that is always intriguing to me with the legislature when they're thinking of things like this is that they don't think about the practicalities of actually implementing this kind of new rule for the schools and how much it's going to cost to do that for the schools. And so you're right, it's very complex. It's not just put it away, turn it off, or not. So thank you very much for all of these comments on that touchy subject. We do have another individual in the queue. Alexander Schalk would like to ask a question. If you would unmute Alexander and direct your question to our legislators.
Hello. This is my first time coming to one of these, and I can't say I really followed up on what's going on in the Indiana State Legislature. I know it's important, but it's hard to follow local politics sometimes with how little they talk about it. But my question is, how do Democrats maintain leverage and get bills they want passed or influence bills when there's a Republican supermajority in both houses? I'm just kind of curious how that works, because it seems like the Republicans could just push the Democrats out entirely if they wanted to.
Matt, would you like to address that first?
Yeah, that's a real problem, because it's pretty hard if you're a minority member to get your bills heard. And, one reality is oftentimes our priorities, our policy preferences don't mesh with what the majority wants. And so right there, you hit a brick wall. But for other things that are less partisan, I find that the key thing is you just have to figure out a way to make it look like somebody else's idea, and you can get your idea kind of stuck in a Republican's bill that's moving through, talk somebody into accepting an amendment. There are different ways you can do that. Occasionally, the Republicans, I've had this experience, it's kind of strange. I actually had previous Governor Holcomb, his office actually asked me to carry a bill about the state archives, because they said nobody else seems to understand in the legislature what the archives even does. So would you carry our agency bill? And so I thought that was kind of strange. And it was very technical, not really political stuff, but that was just interesting. And then I had another experience last year where we had testimony this summer about signal jammers. Basically, criminals have these devices that block your cell phone and your Ring door camera and all this kind of stuff. And it makes it easy for them to commit the crime without being surveilled, and makes it hard for you to call for police. So in this meeting, I started discussing it, and that happens to be one of my areas of expertise. And so the chair of the committee, a Republican just said like, well, you know about this stuff. Why don't you just carry the bill in the next session? Now, the interesting thing that happened there is the bill left the House, no problem there. But then it got to the Senate, and the Senate chair of the committee over there couldn't understand why a Democratic bill had passed the Republican House, and he would not hear it. But there was a Senate bill that came over. So we just took the Senate bill and pretty much put my version of the bill in the Senate bill and passed it. So a senator could have the glory of having gotten his bill passed, even though it was basically my language in it. So playing some of those funny games, I call them funny games, but just there are ways you can finesse it to get your policies through, even if you can't have a big bill signing with the governor.
Thank you. Shelley, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Alexander, welcome. Glad you're here. I would say you're right. It is definitely more challenging for the minority to get bills heard and passed in a supermajority. Case in point, I mean, I have a bill that got heard Monday morning at 10 a.m. and it kind of startled me because I am not used to having on the first week having a bill heard, and I'll tell you, it caught me a little flat-footed because I hadn't done my work in educating people on what the bill is, and if I was a member of the majority, they would just assume, oh, it's all good. I had discussed having it heard in natural resources because that's where the bill was placed, and it got put on the agenda on Friday for 10 a.m. on Monday. So I had to work really quickly. And when on Thursday, when it was up for second readings, I did have Senator Glick approach me and she said, you're going to have to talk to some of my members because they think you're up to something nefarious and you're trying to, pull one over. And so people aren't going to support it. And so I'm working all weekend trying to call people and educate them that there's nothing nefarious here. I mean, believe me, I wanted to do something a lot bigger, but the amount of hoops I had to, jump through just to get something pared down that was fiscally neutral, where DNR, the department head, would be neutral or supportive. Getting a Republican to sponsor it with me, to be the second author on it, was Herculean effort, but we're going to hopefully get it heard on thirds. I have heard that some people will vote against it, retribution on redistricting. So any help that people could have to let their legislators know to please support the bill on third readings. It's a good bill. I think knowing, first of all, it actually partners our DNR with our state higher education institutions for something good, to look at the impact on public health and mental health of our public lands on Hoosiers' health. I think that's good. Being able to figure out a fair, efficient way to collect fees from our fish and wildlife areas in our state properties, so we say public lands, so we can support them and take care of them, is a good thing. But we'll have to see. Oh, and additionally, to be able to learn the role that our public lands can play in mitigating natural disasters, that's a good thing. So any help that you can have in Senate Bill 67, that's the one it is. I would really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shelley. We are quickly running out of time now, and I'm so proud of everybody for having so many questions. I'm going to allow one more individual, and it's George Hegeman, to ask his question. And hopefully we can cover the topic efficiently so that each of you will have a minute or so to give some closing remarks for us. George, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Shelley. Thank you for being here. I have less a question than a comment. I didn't get the bill number, but Shelley mentioned the fact that there are going to be restrictions potentially on syringe and needle exchange. This is a bad idea. Any restriction of syringe and needle exchange lies open the issue of hepatitis B, HIV, and because of the warming of the climate, malaria, chikungunya, Chagas, dengue, West Nile virus, all of these bloodborne diseases. The objection to the needle and syringe exchange program is that the number of needles coming back doesn't equal the number of needles sent out. Well, there are just so many different ways that needles can be disposed of in sharps, by third parties, in all sorts of manner, that this is really not a problem. It has been always something like a 7 back for every 10 out ratio whenever there's a needle exchange program, whatever the venue, whatever the time. And it's just one of the issues that we face. Lawrence County has recently cut out a needle exchange program. Monroe County bears heavily the responsibility for even the surrounding counties for needle exchange and syringe exchange programs. This is an important public health issue, and I hope that you both, at any point you can, will do something to cut off this bill at its socks. Thank you.
Okay, I definitely want to thank you, George, so much. Okay, so the bill is a good bill, actually. It's Senate Bill 91. I'm a co-author on that bill, but the bill pushes out the sunset of of our current syringe exchange programs for 10 years, because if we don't do that, all syringe exchange programs will sunset this next year. So this bill just pushes that out another 10 years. My point was only that in committee, when we heard the bill, it did pass out of health on the Senate side, and it's up for second reading amendments on Monday. But the reason why I was concerned is those individuals that are opposed to it want to ban syringe exchange programs in Indiana entirely. And to me, that is government overreach, because this is a total local control issue. Your county commissioners have to vote to approve. And as you said, George, we don't have very many of these in Indiana, but those counties that have them, they are seeing 83% of those syringes back, being brought back. And so those counties that don't have a syringe exchange program, 100% of those syringes aren't coming back. So, 83% of these syringes are being returned. And it does, all of the diseases that you were mentioning, absolutely, this is good. In Scott County, that we saw the largest rates of HIV and hepatitis in the country. They voted to ban to repeal their syringe exchange program back in 2021. And so Clark County passed a syringe exchange program. And so they are now servicing Scott County, and Clark, Marion, Allen, Monroe, these counties that have the syringe exchange programs, they are showing with data the impact that it's having in reducing all of those, and the impact that it's having in being able to trace. They test the syringes that are brought back to see what new drugs are out there on the market now that they can prepare for. They don't have any of that data if we don't have those syringes. So it's serving, and it's that one touch to extend a hand in harm reduction, in helping individuals get the care that they need, and possibly get on the road to substance use treatment. So it's good. Senate Bill 91 is a good bill to support. We just don't want to see it killed because of anecdotal evidence based in fear and lack of evidence. But as I hear on the floor, I just don't like needles. Well, that's no reason to not support science or data. So Senate Bill 91, support it. It's a good one.
Matt.
Yeah, just very quickly. Unlike most laws, the syringe law has a sunset date on it because you have to really struggle to get these programs approved by the legislature or authorized for the locals. And that's because you have a whole set of people who are not interested in looking at the science or understanding harm reduction. They just feel it's morally wrong to assist someone in taking illegal drugs. They think it encourages it and causes it to happen more. And then they blame every time there's a needle found in a public park or someplace, it's blamed on the needle exchange program. And so that's why you have to struggle every so many years to keep the program going. So if we can get it extended for a decade, that would be pretty good, because that would give us some more breathing room. Hopefully people's attitudes would change by that time.
I want to thank you both. And I also want to thank the audience for all your good questions and just for being so engaged. And make sure that you get your circles of influence involved in discussing these issues and supporting our legislators who took the time to show up, and to the extent possible, those that weren't able to show up today. Shelley and Matt, would you like to have like maybe a minute each to summarize for us where you see things going? Matt, how about you first?
Yeah, I think we've pretty well covered it. Just I would say it's going to be a very fast session. The good news is Republicans seem to understand that people need some help with their bills, or at least you better have something you can point to when you run for reelection. And so that's giving us an opening to push to try to really get something significant done on these affordability issues. And let's just hope we can also push hard to get something done on childcare and healthcare and the whole array of challenges that people face.
Shelley.
I would thank everyone for participating today, and it will be a fast session. I just ask you to look at the language of SB 1, which is greater and stronger restrictions to Medicaid access and more opportunities to throw people off who are eligible, as well as SNAP benefits. So take a look at that one, because it is the priority for the Senate R's. And, stay engaged, stay involved. It'll be pretty fast. If you can get to the State House, that's fantastic. If you can connect with advocacy group, that's even better. And definitely stay connected to me and let me know where you are with some of the bills that you're hearing. And s40@iga.in.gov is one of the email addresses you can use, or shelley.yoder@iga.in.gov.
Okay, thank you so much. This is our first legislative update for 2026. Please join us on January 31st at 9:30 for our next update. You can all follow the General Assembly at their website, iga.in.gov. And I want to make sure to thank Matt and Shelley for taking the time to be with us this morning, all of you for joining us. CAT, Community Access Television Services, all of our team members and our sponsors, the League from Bloomington, Monroe County, Brown County, and Johnson County, the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce, the Limestone Post Magazine, NAACP branch in Monroe County, and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbus. Thank you all.
Thank you.